My name is Pavel Ilyich Voronin. I am 81 years old. I am sitting in my apartment on Tverskaya Street in Moscow. The window behind me looks out onto the same boulevard I have walked for 53 years. I am wearing the uniform I was not allowed to wear when this happened. The 3 stars of a colonel, the red collar tabs, the shoulder boards I earned 6 years after the day I am about to tell you about. I have kept this story silent for 54 years. I kept it silent because the Soviet Union told me to keep it silent. I kept it silent because the man who taught me to keep it silent, Major Sergei Konstantinovich Belov, kept it silent until the day he died, on the 3rd of November, 2025. When Major Belov died, the file was unsealed. The Russian Federal Archives released 17 pages of typewritten Cyrillic on the 14th of January this year. My name is on page 4. His name is on page 1. The third name, the one the West knows, the one you came here to hear, appears on page 7. I am the only person still alive who saw what happened on the morning of the 11th of October, 1971, at the Khimki Military Training Facility, 16 kilometers north of Moscow. I was 26 years old. I was a junior lieutenant. I was assigned to Major Belov's hand-to-hand combat unit because I spoke English, and the Americans had begun sending instructors to observe our methods under the cultural exchange protocols of the SALT negotiations. The Americans had not sent the man who walked through our gate at 6:47 that morning. The man who walked through our gate that morning was not American. He was not military. He was not, by any official document the Soviet Union recognized, supposed to be on Soviet soil. His name was Bruce Lee. He was 30 years old. He weighed 138 pounds. He carried no identification. He carried no luggage. He carried one item, a small black notebook with a leather cord wrapped around it twice, and he held that notebook in his left hand for the entire 43 minutes he was inside our perimeter. I'm going to tell you what happened in those 43 minutes. I'm going to tell you exactly what Major Belov said when he first saw him, and I'm going to tell you what Major Belov did at the end. The thing he was court-martialed for, the thing he never apologized for, the thing he carried with him for 54 years until the day he died alone in a veterans' hospital in St. Petersburg. The salute. October of 1971 in Moscow was not the Moscow you have seen in films. It was the Moscow of Leonid Brezhnev. It was the Moscow of the long stagnation. The leaves on the boulevards turned the color of dried blood in the first week of October that year. There was a frost on the 8th. By the 11th, the temperature at 6 in the morning was -3 degrees Celsius. The air felt like a knife laid flat against your throat. The Khimki facility was not on any tourist map. It was not on most military maps. It was a 47-hectare compound surrounded by 3 concentric fences, outer wire, middle wall, inner razor, and it housed 3 programs the Soviet Union did not officially acknowledge existed. One of those programs was Systema. I want you to understand what Systema was in 1971, because the Systema you have seen on YouTube, the cooperative drills, the soft rolling, the gentle redirections, is not Systema. That is what they teach foreigners. That is the export version. The Systema that Major Sergei Belov taught at the Khimki facility in October of 1971 was a 47-year-old refinement of close-quarters elimination techniques developed for the Spetsnaz reconnaissance brigades. Its operating principle was 3 Russian words: Tiko, Bystro, Navsegda, silent, fast, forever. Major Belov did not teach soldiers to fight. He taught them to remove a sentry from a doorway, to remove a target from a hotel suite, to remove a man from a moving vehicle. The defining characteristic was not the technique. The defining characteristic was that the man being removed never knew until the last half second that he was being removed. Silent, fast, forever. Major Belov had personally trained 1,147 Spetsnaz operators between 1958 and 1971. 43 of those operators had been deployed on what the official records call extraordinary assignments. Major Belov had been awarded the Order of the Red Banner twice and the Order of Lenin once. He was 44 years old. He stood 6'1". He weighed 240 pounds. His knuckles had no scars on them because he had never struck a man with a closed fist in his life. He did not need to. I was the man who stood at his left shoulder for 2 years and 4 months. I was the man who unlocked the gymnasium for him every morning at 5:45. I was the man who handed him the paper cup of black tea he drank between the first and second training blocks. I was the man who watched Bruce Lee walk through the inner gate at 6:47 and stop, and look up at the grey Moscow sky, and breathe in once through his nose, and exhale very slowly through his mouth. I knew, at that moment, that the next 43 minutes were going to be the longest 43 minutes of my life. You will ask me how Bruce Lee came to be inside a classified Soviet military facility in October of 1971. I will tell you what I know. I will not tell you what I do not know. What I know is this. On the 7th of October, 1971, a coded telex arrived at our facility command post from the office of Yuri Andropov, then chairman of the KGB. The telex authorized, under emergency cultural protocol exception, the entry of one civilian foreign national to observe one Systema demonstration session at the Khimki facility on the 11th of October at 06:45 hours. The civilian was identified by a number, subject 14K, and by 3 biographical details. Male, 5 feet 7 inches, 138 pounds, no name, no nationality, no purpose. Major Belov read the telex twice and handed it to me. He said only one sentence. He said, "Pavel, whoever this is, he is not coming here to learn from us." I asked him what that meant. He said, "It means someone above us is curious." I learned the answer to the someone question 17 years later, in 1988, when an aging KGB officer named Vladimir Kryuchkov, who would later become chairman of the KGB himself, told me over a glass of Georgian brandy at a retirement banquet that Andropov had personally watched footage of Bruce Lee fighting on the Hong Kong film The Big Boss earlier in 1971. Andropov had become convinced that Bruce Lee's movement system contained something the Soviet doctrine did not have. Andropov did not believe in coincidence. He believed in studying every possible competitor. He sent Bruce Lee a private invitation through a third-party Hong Kong intermediary in late September of 1971. The invitation was a single sentence in English. It read, "Come and meet the men who teach silence." Bruce Lee accepted on the 29th of September. He flew from Hong Kong to Helsinki on the 8th of October, from Helsinki to Leningrad on the 9th, from Leningrad to Moscow by overnight train on the 10th. He stayed at the Hotel Ukraina for 1 night under a false name on a Hong Kong British passport that he had obtained 2 days before the flight. The name on the passport was not Bruce Lee. I will not tell you what it was. The name is still listed in a closed file at the Lubyanka. At 6:45 on the morning of the 11th, a black Volga sedan with no plates pulled up at the outer gate of the Khimki facility. Bruce Lee stepped out alone. The driver, KGB, 2nd Directorate, did not look at him as he walked through the first gate. Bruce Lee walked the 340 meters from the outer gate to the inner gymnasium alone, in the dark, in -3 degrees Celsius, wearing a black wool overcoat over a black tang suit, carrying one small leather-bound notebook. I watched him on the closed-circuit black and white monitor in the command post. I watched his breath in the freezing air. He walked without hurry. He stopped twice, once to look at the wire fence, once to look at the 3 guard towers, and then continued. His pace did not change. He arrived at the inner gymnasium door at 6:47 and stood outside it for 90 seconds before he knocked. I asked Major Belov afterward what he thought Bruce Lee was doing in those 90 seconds. Major Belov said, he was measuring the room from the outside. The gymnasium was a rectangular concrete hall, 22 meters long, 14 meters wide, with a ceiling of 9 meters. The floor was covered in 3 layers of pressed canvas mats, stained the color of weak tea. There were no windows. There were 2 doors, the one Bruce Lee entered through, and a service door behind a steel cage in the southeast corner. The cage was locked. I had the key in my breast pocket. Along the eastern wall, 11 Soviet enlisted men stood at attention. They had been ordered to stand at attention for 2 hours before the demonstration began, and they would stand at attention for the entire demonstration. They were the audience. They were not allowed to speak. They were not allowed to move. They were not allowed to lower their eyes. Along the northern wall, 3 officers sat behind a long wooden table. KGB Cultural Exchange observers. Colonel Dmitry Volkov, Lieutenant Colonel Anatoly Sokolov, and a man whose name I never learned, and who wore civilian clothes. The civilian wrote in a small notebook for the entire 43 minutes. He did not look up once. Major Belov stood in the center of the room. He wore a black training uniform without insignia. His feet were bare on the canvas. His hands were folded behind his back. His eyes were on the door. Bruce Lee opened the door. He stepped inside. He closed the door behind him. He did not bow. He did not salute. He did not say good morning. He looked at Major Belov for 3 seconds. Then he looked at the 11 enlisted men along the eastern wall. Then he looked at the 3 officers along the northern wall. Then he looked back at Major Belov. He removed his overcoat. He folded it once. He laid it on the floor at his feet. He placed the small, leather-bound notebook on top of the overcoat. He took 6 paces forward and stopped at a distance of approximately 3 meters from Major Belov. He did not bow. Major Belov spoke first. He spoke in English, with the heavy Leningrad accent that he had carried all his life. He said, "You are smaller than I expected." Bruce Lee said, "I am exactly what I expected." Major Belov smiled, once, without showing his teeth. I had been Major Belov's adjutant for 2 years and 4 months. I had seen him smile exactly 4 times in those 2 years and 4 months. This was the 5th. Major Belov said, "I have watched your film." Bruce Lee said, "Which one?" Major Belov said, "The one with the ice factory." Bruce Lee said, "That is choreography." Major Belov said, "Yes, we do not choreograph at Khimki." Bruce Lee said, "I did not come to Khimki for choreography." Major Belov nodded once. He took 2 paces backward to give Bruce Lee the center of the mat. He folded his hands again behind his back. He said the sentence I have replayed in my head every single morning of my life for 54 years. He said, "We train to kill silently. Your kung fu is noise." The 11 enlisted men along the eastern wall did not move. The 3 officers along the northern wall did not look up. The civilian's pencil did not pause. Bruce Lee did not move for 4 seconds. Then he said, "Attack me silently then." I want you to understand what Major Belov heard in those 5 words. In Russian military doctrine, the verb to attack carries a precise technical meaning. It does not mean to strike. It does not mean to engage. It means to commit fully, irreversibly, with the intent to remove. There is no half attack in Systema. There is no demonstration attack. The word, in the mouth of a soldier, is a sealed envelope. Once opened, it cannot be refolded. Bruce Lee had used the verb correctly. Major Belov understood this immediately. He stood very still for 3 seconds. He looked at Bruce Lee's eyes. He looked at Bruce Lee's hands. He looked at Bruce Lee's bare feet on the canvas mat. He took 1 slow breath in through his nose. He exhaled very slowly through his mouth, in the exact rhythm Bruce Lee had used at the inner gate 90 minutes earlier. Then he moved. I want to slow down here, because what I am about to describe happened in less than 1.5 seconds, and I have spent 54 years stretching those 1.5 seconds into something I can understand. Major Belov did not telegraph. Major Belov did not shift his weight. Major Belov did not change his breathing pattern. The first thing that moved was his left foot, and it moved 7 centimeters. Not forward, not back, but on a diagonal at 37 degrees to his right. The second thing that moved was his right hand, which left the small of his back and rose at an angle of approximately 60 degrees toward Bruce Lee's throat. The third thing that moved was his entire body, transferring weight in a single smooth wave from his rear foot to his lead foot in a way that I had been trained to recognize as the Khimki signature. The silent step, the step that does not compress the canvas under the heel. The strike was a knife hand to the carotid sinus, not the windpipe, the carotid. Major Belov did not want to kill Bruce Lee. He wanted to render him unconscious in 0.4 seconds. The strike traveled approximately 83 centimeters from origin to expected impact point. It did not arrive. What happened in those 83 centimeters of empty Moscow air was the thing that I have spent 54 years trying to describe and have failed to describe. Bruce Lee did not block. Bruce Lee did not parry. Bruce Lee did not move backward. Bruce Lee did not move forward. Bruce Lee was simply, suddenly, 22 centimeters to the left of where he had been. His feet did not appear to leave the canvas. His shoulders did not appear to rotate. His head did not appear to duck. He had not jumped. He had not slid. He had not stepped. He had simply, somehow, occupied a different volume of space than the volume Major Belov's knife hand was traveling through. Major Belov's right hand passed through empty air and stopped at the end of its arc. He stood with his hand extended. He did not turn his head. He said, in Russian, very quietly, "Still slishkom shumno." Translation, "Still too noisy." Bruce Lee, from his new position 22 centimeters to the left, said, "I have not moved yet. I want you to understand what Major Belov did next, because this is the moment that has lived in the closed file at the Lubyanka for 54 years. He attacked again. He attacked with the second strike pattern that Systema teaches as the follow-on to any failed primary. A low sweep to the lead ankle, combined with a simultaneous palm strike to the floating ribs. The sweep travels at approximately 17 meters per second. The palm strike travels at approximately 21 meters per second. The two impacts are designed to arrive within 3/100ths of a second of each other, so that the target cannot redistribute weight between the lower and upper attacks. In 1147 Spetsnaz operators, Major Belov had failed to complete this sequence on a live target 3 times in his career. He failed for the 4th time at 6:53 on the morning of the 11th of October, 1971. Bruce Lee was not in front of him. I will tell you where Bruce Lee was. Bruce Lee was behind him. Bruce Lee had passed through the space between Major Belov's outstretched right hand and his rotating left hip, in the half-second when Major Belov's center of gravity was committed to the rotation of the sweep. He had not gone around. He had gone through. He had threaded himself through a gap that, by every principle of Systema body mechanics I had been taught in 2 years and 4 months of training, was not a gap at all. When Major Belov completed the rotation of his sweep, his right ear was 22 centimeters from Bruce Lee's mouth. Bruce Lee did not strike him. Bruce Lee did not touch him. Bruce Lee said, very quietly, in English, "Silence is my language too." Then Bruce Lee stepped 2 paces backward to a respectful distance and waited. Major Belov did not move for 11 seconds. I counted them. I counted them on the wall clock above the southeast door. 11 full seconds in which the most decorated Systema instructor in the Soviet Union stood in the center of a concrete gymnasium with his back to a 30-year-old Chinese-American martial artist who had just walked through his guard like a man stepping through a half-open door. The 11 enlisted men along the eastern wall did not move. The 3 officers along the northern wall did not look up. The civilian's pencil had stopped. Major Belov turned. He turned slowly. He turned all the way around, 180 degrees, until he was facing Bruce Lee at the same distance they had begun at, approximately 3 meters. He looked at Bruce Lee for 19 seconds. I counted those too. Then he raised his right hand to his temple. He saluted. A Soviet military salute, fingers tight, thumb tucked, elbow at exactly 45 degrees. The salute he had given to general secretaries and marshals and the Order of the Red Banner Committee. He held the salute for 4 seconds. Bruce Lee, very slowly, bowed in return. A small, careful bow. Not Japanese, not deep. A Chinese bow of equals. Major Belov lowered his hand. The 11 enlisted men along the eastern wall did not move. They had been trained not to move. But I saw, and I am the only person who saw, Lieutenant Colonel Sokolov at the northern table close his eyes for a long moment, as if he had been hit. Major Belov said, in English, very softly, "Thank you for coming." Bruce Lee said, "Thank you for the lesson." Major Belov said, "Which lesson?" Bruce Lee said, "That silence is not the absence of sound, it is the absence of warning." Major Belov stood very still. Then he said, "You may go." Bruce Lee walked back to the door. He picked up the small leather-bound notebook from on top of his folded overcoat. He picked up the overcoat. He put the overcoat back on. He opened the door. He stepped through. He closed the door behind him. The total time inside the gymnasium had been 43 minutes. The actual engagement had been 4½ seconds. I will tell you what happened to Major Belov after Bruce Lee left the facility. Colonel Volkov rose from the northern table at 6:55. He walked to Major Belov in the center of the mat. He did not raise his voice. He said, in Russian, "Major, you saluted a foreign civilian on Soviet military soil. You will report to the Disciplinary Review Board at 0800 tomorrow." Major Belov said, "Yes, Colonel." Colonel Volkov said, "Do you understand the seriousness of what you have done?" Major Belov said, "Yes, Colonel." Colonel Volkov said, "Do you wish to offer a defense?" Major Belov said, "No, Colonel." Colonel Volkov stood for a moment looking at him. Then he turned and walked out of the gymnasium without dismissing the 11 enlisted men along the eastern wall. Major Belov was demoted on the 12th of October to the rank of captain. He was reassigned on the 14th of October to a training facility in Vladivostok, 9,000 kilometers from Moscow. He served there for 6 years. He was restored to the rank of major in 1977, but never again given command of an elite training unit. He retired in 1989, the year the wall came down. He moved to St. Petersburg. He lived alone in a 2-room apartment on Vasilyevsky Island. He never married. He never wrote a memoir. He never gave an interview. I visited him twice a year for 36 years. On the last visit, in October of 2025, 3 weeks before he died, he was in the Veterans Hospital. The cancer in his throat had taken his voice. He could only whisper. I sat at his bedside for 4 hours. In the last hour, he raised his hand and gestured for me to bring my ear to his mouth. He whispered, in English, in the same heavy Leningrad accent I had heard 54 years before in the Khimki gymnasium. "Pavel, tell them." I said, "Tell them what, Sergei Konstantinovich?" He whispered, "Tell them I saluted a civilian. Tell them why." I said, "Why did you salute him, Sergei Konstantinovich?" He looked at me for a long time. He took one slow breath in through his nose. He exhaled, very slowly, through his mouth. He whispered the last sentence he ever spoke. He said, "Because he had already saluted me." I did not understand what Major Belov meant for 3 months. I went home from the hospital. I went home from his funeral. I went home from the unsealing of the file at the Federal Archives. I read the 17 typewritten pages 4 times. I read my own statement, dated the 12th of October, 1971, in which I described the engagement in 14 lines of clipped Soviet military prose. I did not understand what Major Belov had meant until the 2nd of February this year, when a courier delivered an envelope to my apartment from the Bruce Lee Family Archive in Los Angeles. Shannon Lee had sent it. She had found the small, leather-bound notebook in her father's personal effects, locked in a drawer that had not been opened since 1973. The notebook had a single Russian word written on the inside cover in Bruce Lee's handwriting. The word was Khimki. Inside the notebook, on the page dated the 11th of October, 1971, Bruce Lee had written 3 lines. The first line was in English. It read, "Today I met a man who teaches silence." The second line was in Russian, in Cyrillic letters that Bruce Lee had clearly copied from a phrasebook rather than written from memory. The Russian sentence read, "On уже отдал мне честь." Translation, "He had already saluted me." The third line was in English. It read, "The salute was not in his hand. It was in his decision to attack me at all. He honored me by trying to kill me. I honored him by being worth the attempt." I sat in my chair on Tverskaya Street for a very long time. I am still sitting in it. I will tell you one more thing before I go. The black Volga sedan that brought Bruce Lee to the outer gate of the Khimki facility at 6:45 on the morning of the 11th of October 1971 also took him away at 7:31. The driver, KGB 2nd Directorate, drove him directly to Sheremetyevo Airport. Bruce Lee boarded Aeroflot Flight 247 to Helsinki at 9:15. From Helsinki, he flew to Hong Kong via Frankfurt. He arrived home on the 13th of October. He never spoke of Moscow to his wife. He never spoke of Moscow to his daughter. He never spoke of Moscow in any interview. He never spoke of Moscow in any letter that has ever been released to the public. But 21 months later, on the 20th of July, 1973, when Bruce Lee died in Hong Kong at the age of 32, his personal effects included one small, leather-bound notebook with a Russian word written on the inside cover, and 3 handwritten lines on the page, dated the 11th of October, 1971. That notebook is going on public display at the Bruce Lee Family Archive in Los Angeles on the 1st of September, 2026. The placard will read, in 3 languages, "Donated by Colonel Pavel Ilyich Voronin, in memory of Major Sergei Konstantinovich Belov, who saluted first." Silence was Bruce Lee's language too. It was also Major Belov's last word. End.